you see proposing to printer companies and things like that when people are frustrated about products and things? How do you see proposing by frustration solutions about products that need services and products to actually keep them running?
To printer companies?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the printer companies,
Yeah.
which I thought I am number one frustrated consumer about having to pay $70 to fill my laser printer.
Exactly.
So I'm just curious what your...
I don't know if we can, let me repeat the
I
question.
mean, not that you're going
Sure.
to solve it right now.
So the question was, picked up an example I gave of printer manufacturers, how do we get them to think in a way that, consumers are really using their products? You don't get frustrated by spending $70 for a cartridge. Or worse than that, my Dell printer, almost halfway through the cartridge says cartridge is empty, replace it. And I can go on for 3 months playing the same cartridge. And I just have to see that annoying thing. So I don't know, I mean, I think just like Google came along, you have to have a new company that comes along and does things better. So
it's less about free, it's more about figuring out how to make them monetizable and providing them to the consumer, or
it really touches
on a hard thing for
it touches on the broader concept that we're talking about user evolution, that the way to reach the customer is through gaining their loyalty and trust. So if I create a new printer, well, you don't know my name, let's say Safa's printer, you don't know if you would like me to buy it, and you start seeing that I'm catering to your needs, and the product is viable, then it creates a loyalty and affection. I mean, it may be that I have to price it higher, but then I would find the right customers who are going to be the target market and who could have an affinity with the brand. It isn't just that I'm buying functions and I'm buying printing, that you buy an affinity. Again, I go back to the example of Google or Apple. People who use those products are not just using their function or their functionality. They're using it because there is some trust they have in that. So these companies have to earn that trust.
Right, but just as one little argument for that. On the service side, take something like New York Times or Wall Street Journal, someone who's been providing amazing content amazing reporting for years, and now has to provide all their content for free. It's been a real struggle. Now they're having obviously problems fulfilling advertising and things like that. So it's been this like ongoing struggle of trying to fulfill a business on its own. And actually, I mean, I think there's actually major growing pains going on right now with these online companies. I think online is actually presenting its own problems with having to sustain businesses because of the need for advertising, providing everything for free. Right? I mean, this is a problem.
It is. Online is going through its own stage. I would suggest to you that the internet is at a very, very early stage of its business models, not just its adoption. That advertising and paid models all need to be emerging and they need to be used. So it is a big challenge for the newspapers, but they have to really look at not what they can do, what they can make, as to what is the value. And if I ask you guys here, what is the value of putting New York Times for you? You all will have an answer, and I have to be able to provide that. I mean, I get a Sunday Times, for example. It's pretty expensive, but it's useful for me to pay for that.
Right.
So it has to come back to customers, and it has to be customer-centric. And it may be very sad that the current market is that there is no demand for it.
Right.
I have a question about the digital divide. I'm wondering if you could address the issue of lower-income people and the need for education, especially in American society, where education has become more and more inaccessible, even at the community college levels, as they've been struggling. But could you just talk about, especially as I attended the AARP Diversity Conference last week in Chicago, and a lot of discussion of the increase of ethnic populations, immigrant populations. So could you talk about what you're seeing in terms of that?
Yeah, I think actually in that area, some of the other countries are doing better than the U.S. It's an important area. In fact, the last research that we did at Piper showed that unfortunately one area of digital divide that remained relatively solid was at the income levels, and especially with immigrants. That their usage level of internet was significantly lower than other demographics. I firmly believe that internet access should be like water and electricity. It basically should be available anywhere. There should be obviously some premiums attached to it, And some countries are doing that. You might have heard of the initiatives to provide cheap computers to everyone. And many other countries are doing. And I think that trend is beginning at a very slow level to start. If you even think about how many places you go, and this is certainly not related to just one demographic, but it helps them too, that have free Wi-Fi. When Wi-Fi became popular, even here, then I was kind of telling people, this really should be the way that it should be. Why are you charging it for it? I mean, it's just crazy. And nowadays, many companies are starting to do that. And it makes it easy for people like us who can afford it. So I would prefer to go to a cafe that I can open my laptop and use it rather than log on to AT&T. And it makes it accessible to people who can't afford it. So I think that we still have a long way to go in providing the computers to people who need them. In public places, public libraries and so forth. We have very few computers in libraries right now. I mean, you go to libraries, sure, they have internet access, but just for machines. If you think about it, you could have even cynics saying, we don't need a library, we have Wikipedia, so you should really put laptops in there with access. And we should have widespread Wi-Fi or WiMAX connection. And we're not saying much of it.
So, your comments were well taken about simplicity. And as the owner of a marketing agency that focuses on boomers and seniors, I'm going to go back and take a look at my website, but I'm pretty sure it would pass your test. But I disagree with you regards to the adoption of text messaging by older adults, for which simplicity was the reason. Like, the people that, the adults over 40, over 50 that I know that have adopted text messaging, the driver has actually been based on a principle of human behavior, and that is relationships. Their desire to stay connected with the younger generation, being their kids or their grandkids. Most of them are still using a regular old phone, not an iPhone. So I just wondered if that played into your consideration.
No, I agree with it. I probably oversimplified it, and I want to emphasize the point about rule of simplicity. But I wouldn't rule out that there are other social factors. But the fact that they even think that they could do this connection now, that they couldn't do before. I mean, the desire should have been there even 20 years ago, 30 years ago to connect to your kids or grandkids. But now, people think it's actually possible. I can pick up text messaging and do it. So I don't necessarily disagree that that's probably played a good part in that adoption too.
Enjoy. Oh, go ahead.
I've seen an anomaly, perhaps, in that what you're talking about in the connection between the leading-edge boomers and their grandchildren or the younger generation, I'm seeing as an educator that there's also a real similarity in value systems, which is really interesting to me because I will have classes with 50 to 60-year-olds and young 20s in those same classes, and they have a much more similar point of view. So I think we need to consider that as well, as that we have an alignment in value systems, so that maybe it wasn't there 20 years ago because the difference between those age groups was greater than the difference in age groups between the young 20s and the 60s now. And I'm very amazed to see some lifestyle choices that are very similar. And so as we develop and think about our boomer generation product, we really want to think about having 15 to 30% of that market reaching out to that younger generation who I'm finding have much more similar value systems.
No, I agree. As I said, I think several factors have kind of converged together. And our society is a different society than it was 40, 50 years ago. And there are many factors that have gone into that. But it is a trend that we see now.